Born on the 17th of April 2000 in Clydebank, Scotland, Paige Doherty was a bright and promising 15-year-old girl who had dreams of becoming a successful hair and beauty stylist. She had lived with her mother Pamela, stepfather Andy, and 3 younger siblings whom she had been very close to. Like most teens, Paige was very active on her social media accounts and would spend every day posting and socialising with her friends. On the 18th of March 2016, Paige had slept over at her best friend Lauren Mill's house. The pair had spent the evening doing each other's hair and makeup, practicing their skills and talking about their plans for the future. The next morning, Paige had left Lauren's home early at around 8 AM. She was making her way to her part-time job at Street Image Hairdressers in Kirkintilloch. Paige had been extremely excited about her first part-time job, and according to her mother, would buy gifts with her small wage for her younger siblings. The hairdressers where Paige worked was 12 miles away. As she made her way to the bus stop that morning, like every Saturday, she decided to stop by Delicious Deli to buy a breakfast roll on her way to work. Usually, Paige would purchase something to eat from the Fleming food store yards from the deli. But that morning, as she passed by the store, she gave a wave to the shop owner, who she had known all her life. This was a man named Ashi Ahmed. Ashi would be one of the last people to see Paige, and would also prove to be a vital witness later on. When Paige had entered the deli, she had been the only customer. What was supposed to be a quick transaction on her way to work turned out to be something much more sinister. When Paige did not turn up to work that day, the alarm was raised. Paige was usually a punctual and reliable girl who had taken pride in her Saturday job and the responsibility that came with it. Her employers knew that if she was going to miss work for any reason, that she would have at least let them know. Throughout the morning, all attempts made by Paige's employer to contact her were in vain. Another person who had made desperate attempts to contact her that day was her boyfriend Dylan. Paige was always glued to her phone and was never unreachable, especially to her boyfriend, who she would remain in contact with throughout the day. But as the hours passed by with no reply, Dylan had placed a call to Paige's work to check that she was okay. It would be at this point when it was confirmed that Paige had never turned up to her job. She had also not been active on her social media accounts, which set alarm bells ringing. Paige's mother Pamela soon caught news that her daughter had not turned up to her job as planned that day, and Paige was reported missing to the police. Her family and friends were extremely concerned. It wasn't like her to stay out of contact with her loved ones. Police wasted no time in trying to locate Paige. Missing posters were put up all around Clydebank, and a dedicated Facebook page was set up to help find the missing girl. Sadly, the search would come to a tragic end just 2 days later, when 2 people who had been out walking through the underbrush of a heavily wooded area stumbled across a dead body wrapped in garbage bags. It was soon confirmed to be the missing teenager, Paige Doherty. It was clear to investigators that Paige's death had been a brutal one. This would later be confirmed during her post-mortem examination. Paige had suffered a total of 61 stab wounds. 43 of these were around her head and neck area. She had a further 85 wounds on her body, many of which were determined to be defensive in nature. Paige, who stood at just 4 foot 11 inches tall, had fought aggressively for her life. The stab wound that had likely killed Paige was a large gaping wound on the left side of her neck. It measured at 9.5 by 6.5 centimeters and was 4.5 centimeters deep. This deep wound was created by being repeatedly stabbed in the same place. Her neck tissue was extremely damaged to the point that her carotid artery was severed, causing her to bleed out. With a murder investigation now on their hands, police wasted no time trying to retrace the teen's steps from that morning, examining every minute of her route to work. Soon enough, somebody would come forward with a piece of evidence that would throw the case wide open. This would be none other than shopkeeper Ashi Ahmed. as she had a private CCTV camera covering all the shop fronts on Fleming Avenue. Upon examining the shop's CCTV footage from that day, Ashley realised that he had caught Paige's movements as she made her way to the Deli a few yards away. The more he watched the footage of the teen, it dawned on him that Paige had entered the delicious Deli after passing by his shop, but had never come back out. 10 hours after taking away the system's hard drive to study its contents, police cordoned off the delicious Deli. The deli was owned by a 32-year-old man named John Leatham. John had lived in Clydebank with his wife Cassia, a Poland native, and their baby daughter. As investigators closely examined the CCTV footage, it became apparent that John indeed was their number one suspect in the case. Paige had entered Delicious Deli at 8:21 a.m. The footage showed that she had never re-emerged from the store. At 9:58 a.m, John Leatham, who had now suspiciously closed the blinds and shutters on his store, was seen running into the shop next door, where he purchased bleach, antibacterial wipes, and bin bags. At 10:03 a.m, John was seen again. This time, he was walking outside to open the boot of his car. In the chilling footage, it showed him carrying a bag with Paige's body inside. Her foot with a white sock on was sticking out from the bin bag that he had wrapped her in. Over the course of the next 2 hours, John Leatham had made desperate attempts to clean the crime scene and the bloodied mess that had been left behind from the attack. At 11:59 a.m, Leatham was once again caught on CCTV. This time, he got into his car and drove away before storing the schoolgirl's body in his garden shed for the next couple of days. Once that was done, Leatham had changed into fresh clothes and then returned to work, serving customers as though nothing had happened. He continued to serve customers all day long. For him, it was business as usual. The day after Paige had been murdered, John Leatham had taken his wife and child to the Scottish town of Balmaha for a family vacation. He didn't move her body until March the 21st, 2 days after she was murdered. Paige's body was found the same day that she had been dumped. CCTV had caught Leatham's car close to the body dump site, near the wooded area by the access road. The dump site was less than a mile from Leatham's Deli. He'd cleaned out his car as best he could, trying to make sure that no forensic evidence remained to tie him to the girl's murder. After the discovery of the CCTV of Paige entering his shop, police realised that John Leatham's Deli was likely the murder scene. They carried out a search on his house, car, and the deli. 3 days after Paige's murder, on March the 24th, John Leatham was arrested by police and taken to the station. He denied having anything to do with the killing, telling detectives that he was positive they wouldn't find Paige's blood in his shop. Despite his pleas, blood was said to have been found in numerous locations despite obvious efforts to clean it up. The police questioned John Leatham extensively about Paige's disappearance and murder. At first, Leatham was adamant that he had nothing to do with the young girl's murder, but as time progressed and the police were able to produce more and more evidence against him, John Leatham finally made a chilling admission to police. He claimed that Paige, who he had served in his shop a few times previously, had entered his store that day and asked for a sausage roll. He claimed that as he was preparing the food for Paige, she had asked whether he could give her a part-time job at his deli. John said that he had asked Paige's age, and upon hearing that she was only 15 years old, he had refused. Leatham then claimed that Paige had become frustrated, demanding that he give her a job, otherwise she would tell people that he touched her inappropriately. He said that at this point he had panicked and suffered a gross overreaction to the girl's words. His twin brother George had been put on the sex offenders register, and he feared that if Paige started accusing him, he'd end up on the registry as well. According to Leatham, she started to scream loudly, trying to garner attention. Wanting to silence her, Leatham had reached for a knife and stabbed the teen. He continued to stab her even as the girl fought back. It's widely doubted that John Leatham's series of events were the truth. This was not Paige's nature. She was a kind, caring young girl who put the needs of others above her own, and she already had a part-time job which she loved and would also enable her the experience she needed to progress in the beauty industry. It is highly unlikely that she would have wanted to work with John at the deli shop. Paige's death triggered an outpouring of grief in the local community, and days after the tragedy, hundreds of mourners donned pink clothing and carried heart-shaped balloons when they took part in a memorial walk to pay tribute to Paige. Clydebank's Titan crane was also lit up pink in honour of the teen, and to show support for Doherty's loved ones. A hashtag, Pout for Paige, was created in Paige's honour, a tribute to the teen's love of pouting for selfies. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, posted a photo of herself pouting, using the hashtag in Paige's honour. 2 fundraising pages to help the family meet funeral costs and other expenses collected thousands of pounds within just days of being set up. Paige's funeral took place on April 20th. Her coffin was transported by horse-drawn carriage at St Margaret's Church in Clydebank. Speaking at her funeral, her mother Pamela said, "Her death's been so tragic and unbearable, but it's also done a lot for many people, and it amazes me that it's all down to everyone pulling together for this little angel." Weeks after her death, Paige Doherty's close friends set up a sweet 16th party for the deceased girl, on what would have been Paige's 16th birthday. The murder trial took place on the 12th of October 2016, 7 months after Paige Doherty's murder. The court heard victim impact statements from Paige Doherty's family members. Since Paige had been murdered, Pamela had been suffering from horrifying nightmares as well as bouts of insomnia. She told the court about how she'd wake to the sound of her daughter screaming in fear and pain, and Pamela would be confronted with the fact that she couldn't save her daughter. Paige's stepfather, Andrew Monroe, also spoke to the court about how he had been suffering through severe depression since Paige's death. It was also made known that Paige's younger siblings, who ranged from ages 1 to 11 years old, were feeling the loss of their sister greatly. Paige's 11-year-old brother Andrew, who had additional needs, was perhaps suffering the most. Paige would take him out often to the local park or cinema. John Leatham was sentenced at the High Court in Glasgow and was sentenced to a minimum term of 27 years in jail before becoming eligible to apply for parole. Paige's mother paid tribute to her daughter after the sentencing. In February of 2017, Leatham appealed his sentence. His lawyer fought to have his sentence reduced, claiming that it was much too harsh. To support this, it was put forward that John Leatham was a married man with a young child. He ran a business in the community and had never committed such a crime as this, as the murder had been spontaneous. His sentence was controversially reduced to a minimum of 23 years jail time. Paige Doherty's mother branded the reduced sentence a total joke. Following the news that Paige had been murdered in John Leatham's deli shop, Clydebank residents became irate. Vandals targeted the business multiple times, spray painting messages on the deli, including "scumbag" and "Johnny is a beast." John Leatham's wife, Cassia Leatham, vowed to stand by her murderous husband, even visiting him in jail. Due to her support for her husband, their family home was egged and vandalised following Paige's death. Cassia was also abused whilst visiting Leatham at Lomas Prison in Glasgow. Security officers repeatedly had to step in to protect her after she was abused by the relatives of other inmates. Things became so tense that Cassia Leatham took her baby and fled back to Poland, now living with her grandparents in Osno-Lubuski. Paige's mother Pamela decided to set up a charity in her daughter's name, entitled Paige's Promise. The charity set up 2 children's self-defence classes in Clydebank and Bishop Briggs. It would also provide grief counselling and short breaks to bereaved families. In August of 2018, Paige's biological father, John Bothwell, passed away. According to his mother, he was never the same after the passing of his daughter and died of a broken heart. Friends claim that the brutal violence inflicted on his petite daughter haunted him, and he was vocal about his depression as a result. Pamela has since given birth to another baby girl, who she named Penny Margaret Paige Monroe, in memory of her daughter who was taken too soon. She has expressed her sadness that Paige would never get to meet her baby sister, but Penny has eased the heartache of her family, and Paige would have adored her. Paige's grave reflects her bright and colourful personality, forever branded Glasgow's Angel, a tribute to a life cruelly and senselessly snatched away.